Hi guys, today we'll be diving into stories from Malicious Compliance. Cameras have to be turned on no matter what. Fine by me, don't mind the pump. I am a project manager and data scientist. I manage lots of different public health related projects. There's one project in particular that includes a really demanding team from a federal government department. I recently returned back to work from maternity leave. I work in my office 3 days a week. On those days, I have to pump breast milk at regular intervals for my baby. Luckily, I have my own private office and can usually just keep on working, emails, reports, etc., while I pump. I have a hands-free wearable pump, which is convenient, but is still definitely obvious if I'm wearing it. It pokes about my shirt and is not exactly silent. Recently, we have a Zoom call scheduled during one of the times I needed to pump. Instead of missing the meeting, I figured I would just keep my camera off so I could wear my pump and still participate and listen. Heck, I was even in my office and not working from home. I felt like I was being a pretty committed employee. Meeting starts, a few people have their cameras off. The lead makes the announcement. I just want to remind everyone that our expectation is that you will have your cameras on because this is not a virtual meeting. It is a simulated in-person meeting, whatever that means. I sent a quick private message to explain I was paying attention, but pumping. No response to me. Just instead again, the expectation is that all cameras will be on. So fine. I turned my camera on for this meeting of about 20 people. The camera isn't aimed at my chest, but certainly the top of my pump is clearly visible. I unmuted myself so you could also clearly hear the pump and just said, "Thank you for your patience. I was adjusting my breast pump." The meeting continued awkwardly, with several other team managers letting me know privately it was fine to turn my camera off, but at that point, there really was no point in turning it off. At the most recent meeting, the announcement was, "Please turn on your cameras if you are comfortable doing so." You want to go where? Alrighty then. I have been driving for Uber in Dallas, Texas for over 6 years. A couple of years ago, it was still possible to order an Uber without entering your destination. This ride was one of them. A business couple got in the car and the man was kvetching and moaning at his wife as they got in the car. He sat behind me and she was on the rear passenger side. I noticed a lack of destination, so I asked, "Where can I take you today?" He shot back, "Hobby Airport." Now, that's in Houston, so I asked, "Don't you mean?" Whereas I was cut off by him saying, "I know where the hell we're going, now just drive." I looked into the rearview mirror at his wife. As he was continuously ranting, she just gave a slight head tilt and a shrug. So I got onto Highway 45 heading south for my 250-mile trip. As we were getting out into the boonies, he finally caught his breath and noticed we were halfway to East Jesus, Texas, and demanded to know just where the feck I was taking them. I said he wanted to go to Houston Hobby Airport, and that's where I was going. He then yelled, "You should know darn well I wanted to go to Dallas Love Field Airport." As I turned around to go back, OMG, the moose was on the loose. His wife started in on him. "The driver asked you, but you just had to be all snooty with the 'I know where we're going' and stuff." She just continued on and on and on until he was a pitiful mess who could hardly say anything. Bonus part was that when she was finished with him, she started in on his family. I would have paid for that kind of entertainment. Wanna pass? Fine by me. This malicious compliance occurred several years ago when I was working away from home for a week at a time. My gig was at a resort right on the beach. Yeah, tough, I know. The drive from the resort into town was a mile long, all uphill. The first half of the drive wasn't too steep, but the second half was a steep climb, one lane in each direction. When returning towards the resort and going down the steep stretch, it was impossible to stay under the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. It was much easier to coast down the hill, but you would be way over the speed limit when you got to the bottom. At the bottom of the steep part was a four-way stop. One evening I was driving into town and noticed a police car parked on the other side of the street, near the four-way stop, with his radar gun pointed backwards to catch the speed of the cars coming down the hill. So I made a mental note to be extra careful and stay under 25 on my way back. A few minutes later, on the return trip, just as I started down the steep decline, a motorcycle with two guys aboard pulled in behind me. They really didn't like me continuously tapping my brakes and staying under 25. They weaved back and forth, honked, and flipped me off for going so slow. Cue malicious compliance. You want to pass? Fine. I pulled to the right as far as I could and kept slowing down until they lost their patience. They blasted past me, going through the gears in rapid succession, both flipping me the bird as they passed. They must have been going at least 60 miles an hour by the time they reached the stop sign. By the time I reached them, they were pulled over to the side, off the bike, standing in the glow of the cops' flashing lights. I gave them a friendly wave as I passed. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below. Thanks. Kavina Karen wants to use the shoulder lane to escape traffic. I dared her. This happened just a few hours ago. I was driving a semi on a highway when the traffic suddenly became bumper to bumper on a two-lane due to an accident a couple of miles ahead. Everybody was creeping, and I was in the right lane. Suddenly, I saw a regular vehicle, not an emergency vehicle, on my right side, shoulder lane, passing me. There's not even an exit nearby. I was like, hell to the no, and as soon as I saw a couple of other vehicles behind me trying to do the same thing, I immediately blocked them by going slightly into the shoulder, so I'm occupying two lanes. I got a few honks, but I couldn't care less. If I'm suffering in traffic, everyone else should too as well. Shoulder isn't for passing. As long as I didn't see any flashing lights behind me, I wasn't opening up that shoulder. We were crawling anyway. A few hundred feet ahead, I saw an idle police cruiser in the shoulder up ahead. Figuring that nobody would dare use the shoulder anymore, I merged back to my lane. Turns out I was right. The shoulder became empty all of a sudden. But that's not the end. While I was chilling, still creeping, I heard a very annoying, repetitive honk on my left side. I looked and saw this lady with huge sunglasses, ponytail, bending down on her seat, looking at me, yelling something, looking outraged. I rolled down, and this is the following conversation. Karen: You know you're blocking two lanes, right? Me, confused. Huh? Karen: I was behind you on the right lane, and you wouldn't move. I honked, and you didn't care. Me: That's a shoulder. You're not supposed to drive on the shoulder. Karen: That's a lane. You're allowed to drive there. While she's still yelling incoherently, we are still slowly moving, and then I remembered. There's an idle police cruiser on the shoulder that I saw a while back that we didn't pass yet. I'm sure everyone knows by now. Malicious compliance initiated. I reduced my speed even more, so Karen is a little faster than me on the left lane. Then I dare her by giving her the signal that she can pass me to use the shoulder. She aggressively took it, cut in front of me, and immediately went to the shoulder. However, what Karen didn't know was that the cruiser is already around the corner. I was driving a semi, so my field of vision is much higher and wider than everyone else. Karen was driving a sedan. Her field of vision is much lower and limited. What I didn't take into account was how aggressive Karen was driving. She cut the corner so quick without looking, she ended up hitting the cruiser. Sorry, Ossifer. It was so abrupt that I can hear the crash pretty loudly. I can also tell that the driver in front of me was gasping in shock as well. I've never seen an officer get out of the cruiser so fast. This dude practically jumped out of the cruiser in less than 1 second. Then this is what I witnessed and heard when I'm creeping slowly with traffic. Not wanting to miss anything, I rolled down my passenger window. Ossifer: Get out of the vehicle. Karen, still inside the car, full fluster mode. Officer: Get out now. Karen finally gets out and literally word per word: But I wasn't at fault. You were stopped on a lane. Officer: This is a shoulder for emergencies, not for your convenience to escape traffic. Karen: But... Incoherent sob story as I drove away from the scene. I couldn't hear what's going on anymore, but I kept watching my front as well as the side mirror. Judging from her body movement, she was indeed panicking while pointing at my truck. Don't know why. Then, before the scene disappeared from my mirror, the last thing I saw was the officer pulling his handcuffs and cuffing Karen. Surprisingly, she complied without causing any more scenes. Then I continued to drive into the sunset. Don't touch the food, if you insist. 20 years ago, I worked in the mailroom for a big company in Boston. It was our policy that when people ordered food for meetings, it was the job of whoever was running mail on the floor that the meeting was being held on to meet the caterer in the lobby, take the food to the meeting room, set it out, then clean up the room after the meeting was over. Normally, you would clean up during your hourly mail run and take the leftover food to the lunchroom. If you were not already on the lunchroom floor, you would take the food back to the mailroom and give it to the person that was running that floor. Now at this point, it was normal for the mail staff to get first dibs on the leftovers. Some people didn't like that. This is the main conflict. So one day my boss comes up to me and tells me that I'm going to have to come in Friday morning at 5 a.m. to set up the boardroom for an important partners meeting. I'm fine with that, extra pay and all. So I show up, set up a massive spread of food, and head down to the mailroom to waste some time on the computer. 15 minutes later, I get a call from Cool's secretary, the one that was in charge of the meeting. Hey, OP, the meeting was canceled. Can you get the food and bring it to the lunchroom? Keep it at the mailroom first so you guys can get a free breakfast if you want. Sorry about wasting your time. So I trot to the boardroom with a growing belly, thinking how great it's going to be to get first dibs for a change. There's no food. None. Gone. I go check the lunchroom. Nothing. Puzzled and hungry, I tell my boss and start my mail run. About halfway through the run, I come across the desk of awful secretary. And lo and behold, all of the food is behind her desk, stacked on cabinets and desks. Me. Is that the food from the big meeting? Awful secretary. Yes, it is, and you're not touching it. Me. Cool secretary asked me to bring that to the lunchroom. Awful secretary. I don't care. You guys will keep it all for yourselves. I sent a message out to everyone telling them that I have the food, and if they want some, they can come ask me for it. But you are not to touch it. Me. Okay. You don't have to get mad. I'm just doing my job. Awful secretary. No, you're not. You're trying to steal food that you didn't order. At this point, I'm thinking to myself that she didn't order it either. Cool secretary did. But it's not my place to fight, so I just go back to the mailroom and tell my boss that I found the food and that she was adamant that we not touch it. He's like, whatever, we'll talk to Cool Secretary Monday when she gets back to the office with her partner. So now it's 5 p.m. and I'm doing my last run of the night, and as I pass Awful Secretary's desk, I see that she's already gone home and left all the food stacked around her desk. Following her orders, I touch nothing. Monday morning comes and my boss has an evil grin on his face. OP, can you deliver these cleaning supplies to Awful Secretary's desk? I show up to a glorious mess. The gallon jugs of orange juice that Awful Secretary had left on her desk had fermented and burst open, spraying clods of rotten orange juice all over the place. It looked like they had rolled onto their sides as they swelled and shot across the room like water rockets when the pressure got too much to contain. It was awesome. Awful Secretary. Why didn't you clean this up Friday night? Me. Because you told me not to touch it. A memo went out that morning reminding people of the meeting food policy. Solicitor embarrassed me and made me cry 3 times, so I became super efficient at my job. This happened many years ago. I only just found this sub, and while my story is nowhere near as witty as the ones I'm reading, it still makes me chuckle. When I was around 19, I was working as a receptionist in a house at a solicitor's office. It was quite small, but very successful. 4 partners. Main one was the lady it was named after, who was kind of a fierce in a Judge Judy kind of way, so I'll call her Judy. And a new solicitor, we'll call Anna, had joined the team. We had a conveyancing, a personal injury, finance, and criminal department solicitor, and she would be working family law, and her specialty and main focus would be helping domestic violence victims. At this time, all of the abused clients were women. She was awesome at her job. I saw so many victims while they waited in reception, and because they were so stressed and worried, they would sometimes just tell me their life stories while they waited. I did my best to comfort them. Sometimes they would have to wait an hour or longer if something else was happening. Anna advocated hard for these women. Restraining orders, emergency hearings, police interviews, protection, arranging safe houses, custody of children. They really admired her, and still do now. Those women needed her. The thing about Anna was she was extremely posh. Well educated, she spoke better than the characters on Downton Abbey, or even the Queen. But she was also very opinionated, and she swore a lot. Hearing her talk about one of the husbands of a woman, what an absolute twatting little "see you next Tuesday" in a voice that sounds similar to the Queen made us giggle. But she reined it in and was mostly professional in front of the clients. Most of my job was filing, typing voice dictation statements, and logging calls from women with restraining orders who had been contacted by their ex-partners. So I'd get a lot of calls. "Hi, Sabrina. He called me at 8:15 a.m. and 10 a.m. today. Also an email at 9 p.m. through his mother's account." Things like that. It all had to be logged and reported for the court files. I got so many of these calls, I'd recognize each by voice. This is important later. After she'd been there for maybe a month, she was featured in an article that put the office in a very good light. The article highlighted her important work in keeping these people safe. We celebrated with her. But it went to her head, and she became arrogant and snappy, with little put-downs here to the secretaries and other workers. She became pretty full of herself, getting snarky and barking out "coffee" to me as soon as she walked inside. I let it go. She was stressed and doing something important. As it was so long ago, most documents had to be faxed. Her office was 2 doors away from reception. She would let me know if she was expecting something important, and I would drop everything to rush the documents to her. Waiting for legal stuff, police reports, or restraining orders could quite literally be the life and death situation for the clients. Sure enough, a restraining order document came through for a female client who was sitting with Anna in her office. She was crying, looked like she had no sleep. Her story was horrendous. I felt desperately sorry for her. The rule was if something important came through, I had to rush and interrupt any client meeting. The papers came through. I rushed to the office and handed them to Anna and left. Moments later, Anna was in reception screeching at me because the timestamp said it was delivered a whole hour earlier. I was confused. I had given it to her the moment it came through. She would not stop yelling that I had put this woman's life in jeopardy over my laziness and stupidity, and I should be fired. She made so much noise that Judy came out of her office to listen. Her face gave absolutely nothing away, and afterwards she quietly just said, "Please make sure to give the documents quickly in the future to avoid any more problems." It happened again. An 8-page document came through for that same client who was in there with her. I rushed to her office, handed them to her, and went to leave. Before I could, Anna started yelling at me again. "This was an hour ago. What the F, Sabrina? What the F did I tell you?" This time she started swearing, and I couldn't get a word in, and all of this in front of the poor client who looked wildly uncomfortable. Judy came to the door again, and again her face gave nothing away, and just asked me to come with her. She asked if there was a problem. I explained, and she thanked me. Anna then followed us out and started yelling at me that I had no respect or kindness in my heart for these women, that I was lazy, utterly incompetent, and ridiculously not right in the head. I cried in the toilets. Over the next few days, the same client came in. Things had escalated further and had hit the newspapers. It was an awful case. So the 4 partners, along with Anna, were meeting with her in the same office. I went back in to give a file to one of the other partners there, and Anna piped up, "Was this from an hour ago too? There seems to be a pattern here." Again, in front of the client and her 4 bosses. It didn't bother me this time, though. I had had one of those moments in bed the night before, the moment when your eyes snap open while you're trying to sleep and you have that bingo realization moment. So I calmly just said, "The reason the documents appear to be an hour late was because the clocks have changed for daylight savings time. I should have realized that when the ink was still not dry as I handed them to you." Sure enough, the document on her desk yesterday was a little smudged. The fax machine was old and didn't update the time. My little victory moment was spoiled, however, because as I was leaving the office, I tripped over my own foot and knocked my head into the doorframe, giving Anna a good laugh. The next day, a staff meeting was called about professionalism in the office. The client who witnessed Anna's meltdown had approached Judy. She was really upset to see Anna treat the staff that way, and her swearing had frightened her. Judy was very clear this was not acceptable. The woman had heard enough yelling and swearing for a lifetime. Anna begrudgingly apologized to me, and I shrugged it off. Judy also apologized privately for not stepping in when she should have. No problem. Malicious Compliance was next. Every single call I had to log, instead of the main list that I used on the computer from the women, I wrote on an individual post-it. So I'd be in and out of her office 10 times an hour. Her desk was flooded with post-its that just said, 10 a.m. call from husband to client X. She was annoyed, but this is what she asked for. I wasted a lot of post-its. Next bit got a little strange. A lady who was in a shelter/safe house with her daughter called and said she was reconciling with her husband, and she wants to drop the case completely and did not want to be contacted again. This happens sometimes. Victims go back when it gets too much. This was a particularly brutal case. I told Anna straight away, who said she would call her in a few days. Calling right then might jeopardize her safety if he is there. And I said, no, call the police. She asked why, and I said it wasn't her on the phone. I recognized her voice every time she calls. It wasn't her. We called for a welfare check, and sure enough, her husband had taken her back home and had his older daughter call the office pretending to be her. He was arrested. When it all worked out well, the lady again was in a much better safe house. Anna gifted me a bottle of wine and a thank you card, and then asked me to stop with the post-its, and that the message was received. She also apologized again, properly. Sorry for the long post. Moral of the story is, don't treat people like dirt, even if your intentions are pure and trying to help someone. We can all be kind. Want me to drill in style? Gladly. Overheard this delicious malicious compliance story on the train. 4 friends sat facing each other. I was seated across the aisle. They seemed to be having a great time, sharing stories and laughs. I couldn't really not hear what they said. One guy works for a company where he did a lot of handiwork, but also had to be in the office every now and then for paperwork and client calls. One day they had a new coworker, a young woman, who joined the company as an apprentice. Soon after she joined, some of his coworkers complained about her outfits, crop tops, short shorts, lots of cleavage, etc. So their boss implemented a dress code, suits for men, long pants, or over-knee skirts with a button-up blouse for women. The guy thought the suit rule wouldn't apply to him, as he frequently had to go out to clients and do some handy/construction work. He said something about drilling, this part is difficult to translate, and came to work in his regular jeans and work shirt outfit. His boss didn't like that his new rule wasn't followed by everyone and gave him a warning. At this point, the story came to a halt because the guy started laughing in anticipation of what he was about to say. Apparently, he wore his wedding suit to the construction sites he had to visit doing his work until a client complained about work safety. He was allowed to wear his work wear again, but still had to put on a jacket when in the office. Dude, if you're reading this, sorry for stealing your story, but I'm sure you look great drilling in a 3-piece suit. Hey guys, if you liked today's video and would like to help the channel, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And let me know in the comments what other subreddit stories you'd enjoy hearing.